When I was studying at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, I'll never forget something that my concept photography teacher, David Wasserman, who was interviewed in episode 2 of his podcast, said to the class. Stop taking pictures and start making pictures. I really do feel like this is a concept that separates casual hobbyists from the professionals. The planning and execution so that you get your intended results with as much regularity as possible. I feel like no other photographer follows this credo quite like Gregory Crewdson, a fine art photographer and educator from New Haven, Connecticut, who creates these vastly detailed, multi-layered landscapes of small-town America filled with mysterious characters, uncertain intention, and unspeakable beauty. I would almost liken him to a dark and brooding Norman Rockwell. He photographs on film a large 8x10 view camera, mostly on location in Connecticut, and then scans and converts the images to digital to create massive prints up to 100 inches on the long side. He meticulously documents the process of his photographs from the initial idea to the staging of the lighting, the position of the camera, the actors, the specific props and locales, creating storyboards and sketches of the intended images. His process is almost like staging a ballet, requiring a team of people to ensure subjects are positioned just right, so that his camera can see them in relation to their environment, which is often a large vista that they are merely a speck in. I'm Robert Schultze, and this is Lightmeter. Today I'm going to talk about Gregory Crewdson and his approach to what I would call large-scale photographic production. He has been awarded the National Endowment for the Arts Visual Artist Fellowship in recognition of his work, along with featured showings in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Whitney Museum of American Art, and the Brooklyn Museum. He is also represented by Gagosian Gallery worldwide and by White Cube Gallery in London. Crewdson was born in Brooklyn, New York on September 26, 1962. His father was a psychoanalyst, and he has proclaimed that this was a great influence on him and a key development to his sensibilities as a photographer. He attended John Dewey High School, graduating early. As a teenager, he was a part of the punk rock group called the Speedies in New York City. In 1979, their song, Let Me Take Your Photo, was featured in a Hewlett-Packard commercial prophetically to Crewdson's future career to promote digital cameras and later on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. At Purchase College, State University of New York, he began experimenting with photography. At this point, he was not taking it seriously. He only saw it as a creative outlet and a hobby. Gaining school recognition and a growing interest for art, he graduated undergraduate from SUNY Purchase and later attended Yale University, receiving his Master of Fine Arts. His senior thesis embodied everyday life through portraiture of Lee, Massachusetts residents, the same location that would later inspire his first series, Natural Wonder, from 1992 to 1997. He has taught at Sarah Lawrence, Cooper Union, Vassar College, and Yale University School of Art, where he has been on the faculty since 1993. In 2012, he was the subject of the feature documentary film Gregory Crewdson, Brief Encounters. If you're even remotely interested in editorial photography or even cinematography, I cannot recommend this documentary enough. The film follows the construction and the behind-the-scenes explanation from Crewdson himself of his thought process and vision for his pieces in his collection Beneath the Roses. Historically, most photographs, staged or otherwise, tell a complete story. The works of his contemporaries like Cindy Sherman, Todd Hido, and Diane Arbus may have a sense or feeling of mystery or an enigmatic narrative, but they have a complete narrative. Crewdson's images are constantly making you stop and ponder who, what, or why. His photographs only exist in time, with no beginning, middle, or end in sight. Similar to his previous projects, its haunted urgency and profound dislocation from the audience is uncomfortable yet familiar. Branching off of his previous collections, Crewdson's interventions into the streets of typical American suburbia become a nuanced interpretation of reality, of lifestyle focusing on the most dramatic emotions and complex moments of silence and thought for the subject. They tend to evoke feelings of contemplation, loneliness, and melancholy, but not in a cynical or pessimistic way. It's simply, in a word, accurate. His subjects are presented with compassion and empathy, even if many of them are going against their principles, who hurt and abandon one another and live in homes of shiny manufactured objects. This is easily his most recognized and iconic collection. His photographs usually take place in small town or rural America, but are dramatic and cinematic. Beneath the Roses aim to capture a cinematic production in the stillness of each picture. With a budget similar to that of a small movie production, each image involved hundreds of people and weeks to months of planning. These photographs are assembled almost like sound stages, sometimes literally being assembled on a soundstage, and have a full crew of technicians, actors, and many other people with different skills and expertise. His photographs are elaborately staged and lit using crews familiar with motion picture production and lighting large scenes using these techniques. Sometimes a single photograph can take days or weeks to capture and shut down the town they are being produced in. The creation of a self-defined American realist landscape photographer and his peculiar style originates from Crewdson's long appreciation for 20th century melodramas and literature, specifically Hitchcock and Ralph Waldo Emerson. He has cited Vertigo, Night of the Hunter, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blue Velvet, and Safe as having influenced his style, as well as the films of Steven Spielberg and Wes Anderson. These films drove Crewdson to challenge the essence of light, and inspired his moment-between-moment process of thought from creative angles and cryptic perspectives. They are less like photography production sets and more like movie sets. His work became a complicated mix between his formal photography training and education and his experimentation with the ethereal perspective of life and death, a transcending mix of lively pigmentation and morbid details within a traditional suburbia setting. Crewdson explored the idea of challenging tradition with experimentation of his title outside of the US at the abandoned Cinecittà Studios outside of Rome. Known for its mysterious stillness and emptied character, the set was new to Crewdson's typical use of subject and storyline, but reflected the same balance and organic nature of a created set turned into an art piece. The simplicity of Sanctuary's development contrasts Crewdson's tendency for detail and specifically evoking a more compelling landscape that was already created for him. Although his earlier series were characterized by large production crews, custom-built stages, and hired actors, Crewdson traveled with only a small team to create the haunting black and white portraits of deteriorating buildings and deserted streets that are flawlessly reproduced in this book. These new photographs are a bold departure, which conveyed the dramatic subtext and charged emotions that characterized his earlier works. By converting these cinematic scenes into ordinary life, he explores a new and unfamiliar genre of his own, focused on naturalizing a man-made scenario in a world already based on the artifice of American lifestyles. This book caught the attention of White Cube, Crewdson's European agent in London, gaining him further acclaim in the fine art world. Most recently, Crewdson has created Cathedral of the Pines, similar in scale and locale to Beneath the Roses and Twilight, a distanced interpretation of exaggerated drama by an intervention into human nature in its most raw state. Sometimes I try and make my own Gregory Crewdson type images. I've had the opportunity to work on several campaigns that called for and allowed a similar scale of visual style and production. Some of my own personal projects have touched on the territory of vast landscapes and ant-sized people, but there is something so unique and otherworldly about his images. Something that only a mindset of making photographs in its truest essence can accomplish. Lightmeter is researched, hosted, and produced by me, Robert Schultze. It's also co-produced by Lauren Baines and recorded in San Jose, California. Did you enjoy this podcast? Let me know your thoughts and send an email to lightmeterpodcast@gmail.com. You can listen to us on anchor.com/lightmeter, and I'm on Facebook at Lightmeter Podcast, Twitter at LightmeterPC, YouTube at Lightmeter. I know, sorry, there's a lot of variation on the name, but if you search for Lightmeter and see our podcast logo, that's the one. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you next time.